Good evening, everyone. I'm Cheryl Court with the Coalition for Smarter Growth and with Rise Prince George's, and we are just letting folks in. Thank you for joining us. I'll give this I'll give it another minute before we start the event. I want to first of all thank District 7 Councilmember Krystal Oriadha for joining us. Just to introduce this event, this is Winning Safer Streets for Prince George's, what state officials and community activists are working on. We're grateful that Councilmember Oriadha can join us, and we appreciate that that we also have a number of state officials, but I also actually just wanted to recognize, I'm not seeing them here. A number of, maybe I'll do it at the end, a number of elected officials RSVP'd for the event, but I'm not seeing them right now. So maybe we'll recognize local elected officials at the end. So I just wanted to start by thanking Councilmember Oriadha for joining us and to just kind of give us a welcome. This is sort of, we're virtually visiting Capitol Heights, as it were, and Central Avenue, and looking forward to future plans for a safer Central Avenue. So Councilmember Oriadha, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for the work that you do in creating this space to have these important conversations. As many of you on the call know, that this is something really crucial to this district, in District 7, when we talk about inside the Beltway, how we can create more walkable, safe community. In District 7, we have a lot of people that take public transportation, and we know that we don't have the resources lining up with really the lifestyle of the community, right? When we talk about people needing access to walkable grocery stores, entertainment, nightlife inside of the district, we just don't have that. And so sometimes this issue and concern is one I think that just goes overlooked. And it's something that's at the forefront. When we think about development, we should have this in mind. You know, that's why we're having this conversation really around the community about how we're developing and how we're prioritizing, making sure that we have the right things in our community, and making sure we're thinking about how do we continue to create those walkable, livable infrastructures within, like, these basically mini communities, I think about it, around the district. And so that's really important to me. And to do that, we really have to put pressure on people like myself and people on the state level to be conscious about the decisions that we make, and do they yield to the outcome that we're promising? Because we all tend to talk about, yes, we want these walkable, vibrant communities, but are the policies and the decisions that we're making actually aligned to really creating those? And so I'm someone that's really committed to thinking about the decisions that I make in this role and making sure that they align to the vision that not only I see for the community, but I know that the residents want as well. And so I just can't say enough how much I appreciate the stakeholders really not letting this issue go, and pushing people to keep this at the forefront. Because if we don't have you all at the table pushing this issue, I can promise you right now that we won't see the future that we're all striving to see. So I know this will be an amazing conversation. I apologize that I won't be able to be with you the entire evening, but I just wanted to make sure that I welcomed you to the virtual conversation around District 7 and walkable communities. And I look forward to learning what comes from the conversation.
Thank you so much, Councilmember. And, I appreciate that you have expressed your passion and engagement on these issues of creating walkable and safe places. And certainly appreciate your exhortation for us to be advocates. We know that you come from an organizing and advocacy background, so we will continue to try to be good advocates to move the state and the county in the right direction. The purpose of this event is really to learn about new opportunities, new actions under Governor Wes Moore's administration, where there's a strong new emphasis on safer streets and better transit and walkable communities. And so we appreciate that direction coming from the governor, and we appreciate many of the work of Maryland Department of Transportation officials and how we can work with them to implement some of these new ideas. And so I wanted to first actually just recognize the co-sponsors for this event. I want to thank, in addition to Coalition for Smarter Growth and Rise Prince George's, the Washington Area Bicyclists Association is also a co-sponsor along with the Capital Market, and we'll hear from Ashley Drakeford, Capital Market in a bit, and Greater Capital Heights Improvement Corporation and the Local Initiative Support Corporation, LISC. And so with that, I actually wanted to recognize a couple of elected officials, but I actually ask all of the elected officials to put into the chat their name and title. I see that Councilmember Martin Mitchell from City of Laurel's joined us, Kristen Weaver from City of Greenbelt, Anthony Tillman from, is it District Heights?
Yes, it's District Heights. Yes.
Okay, got that one. Thank you, Councilmember, for joining us. And with that, I would like to invite our future speaker, Kandese Holford. She's with Maryland Department of Transportation, and she is the Director of Active Transportation and Micromobility. And she's here to share new efforts from MDOT on improving walk and bicycle access and improving safety on state roads. And as we know, or what I think it's important to always be aware of, is that Prince George's faces a huge challenge in terms of leading in terms of traffic deaths, pedestrian deaths in the region and the state generally. And most of these traffic deaths in the county and actually just at large tend to be on state roads because they're the bigger, faster roads. But these are essential, integral parts of our communities. Maryland 214 Central Avenue runs along the Blue Line corridor. Maryland 410 is the East-West Highway, which obviously serves many metro stations and future Purple Line stations. So with that, Ms. Holford, please share with us what you've been working on. Oh, you're on mute.
All right, how's that?
That's great.
Okay, thank you, Cheryl, and good afternoon, everyone. Really honored to be here and share a little bit about what we're doing at MDOT. As Cheryl said, I'm Kandese Holford, Director of Active Transportation and Micromobility at MDOT. I work at the Secretary's office, and we've sort of created this new office. It actually just officially became an office. Funding-wise, so happy about that. But we created a new office at the Secretary's office to help coordinate and create some consistency across all of the MDOT modes when it comes to complete streets, but even more broadly, just biking, walking, and designing transportation for underrepresented users as well. So I am sharing my screen. Can you see it, Cheryl? Okay, great. So what we've been doing is giving a little update on all things complete streets, which includes an update to our 12-year-old complete streets policy. So this will just be a quick overview of where we stand with that, and then open it up to the panel and the rest of your agenda. Cheryl, I'll be pretty brief, just to allow for discussion. So as I mentioned, just briefly go over what we're doing with Complete Streets, how we're framing it in Maryland, and then how we've reflected that in our updated policy. Talk a little bit about our approach to implementation, and then just provide you some contact information so that we can get the discussion started. So as we're doing our outreach and starting to dabble in a bit of training for our folks internally at MDOT, we thought it was important to create sort of a consistent definition for Complete Streets as we are recognizing it. And so we are phrasing it as a deliberate approach to the way that we're planning, designing, and constructing our streets. And we're making sure that those streets are safe for all users. So there's a safety component and a multimodal aspect. And that's kind of what we are teaching to when we are educating internally and then externally as well. We are looking at it as a process. We're looking at Complete Streets as part of a network, right? So a context-sensitive network and a network that offers several different types of travel options. Those options are all safe, and they're not only moving goods, they're not moving vehicles, they're also moving people. So that's, we're recognizing that as well. And then finally, the concepts that are applied to Complete Streets or are associated with that are applied to all phases of our project development. So that's kind of how we're framing it to begin with. This kind of jumps from slide to slide. Let me back up a bit. Okay. So this graphic in the PowerPoint version does a great job of displaying in a video format the proliferation of Complete Streets policies since about the early 2000s. It's something that our great advocacy organizations have been tracking for us for a few years now, probably a better part of 20 years, but it's not new to the United States, and it's not even new nationwide. So Complete Streets really is a fundamental part of good planning and good design. But as it stands today, we have over 37 states that have issued Complete Streets policies alone, and many, many more coming from our municipalities and other jurisdictions. So in Maryland, we're kind of recognizing that now, since our initial issuance of our Complete Streets policy in 2012, we've had a couple of things happen, right? We've had Vision Zero passed as a law in 2019 for the first time. I believe we were one of the first states to become officially a Vision Zero state. And then we've also published guidance like our context guide, and other complementary guidance from other modes like our MTA bus stop design guide, and then our local jurisdictions who have done a great job advancing safety efforts as well as multimodal transportation efforts. So we've seen that in Baltimore City and Montgomery County, especially with their Complete Streets design guides. So we've taken stock of all of that and updated our bike ped master plan for 2050, but also recognized that the more Miller State Plan and Maryland's Transportation Plan do echo some of the themes that resonate with Complete Streets. And so those are kind of listed here just to remind us all that when it comes to safety, equity, mode shift, sustainability, we can find them in more than just our pedestrian safety action plan and even our bike ped master plan. It expands beyond. So that's kind of what this slide is speaking to. And then again, as I mentioned, in 2012, our policy looked a little different, came from SHA, whereas in 2024, our policy is MDOT wide. In 2012, we were pretty strict with statute in that it only applied to 3 of our modes. So our aviation administration, our transit administration, and our highway administration. In 2024, we have all of the MDOT modes, including our Maryland Transportation Authority, and even WMATA, who were part of the development of the policy and have committed to some degree to comply with it by 2025 or starting in 2025. So other exceptions or other distinctions between the 2012 and the 2024 policy is the way we're going about our waivers and our exceptions. We're looking for a bit more of a streamlined process and more stringent policies when it comes to the waivers. And then finally, safety performance functions are more specifically defined in the 2024 policy. And really what that means is that we are getting a bit more aggressive and working together with all of our safety partners within MDOT to make sure that we attach some quantitative data to the decision making when it comes to the impact to safety. Our policy, which was issued on June 1st, 2024, it is effective June 1st, but it won't be fully operational until we develop an implementation plan. So that's kind of what this slide is showing here, is that there are a couple of steps that are involved in developing or implementing this policy. And we want to make sure that all our modes are on the same page when it comes to the way we're engaging the public, the way we are using an objective statement to guide our project purpose and our outcomes, the way we're tracking safety and performance, and the way that we are collecting and reporting on multimodal data. So I would say those are 4 key elements of our policy. As you know, it's a couple pages long, but there's still a bit more meat that's necessary. So we'll be working over the next 6 months with the modes to make sure that we're all on the same page and can document how we are going to go about doing each of these 4 things. We also ran a review of all of the related complete streets guidance and documents that we have. So our context guide is familiar to some of you. It established a framework that expanded, our understanding of urban versus rural and made it specific to our landscapes and our land uses in Maryland. But there are other documents out there to the tune of a couple dozen, I believe, that we reviewed and ranked and prioritized for update based on their impact to our ability to deliver complete streets and the impact to the organizations that own them. So those modes. And we made some recommendations for things to focus on as we look through those documents. And then our policy also outlines a requirement that the ones that were ranked highest priority or most impactful to our operations need to be updated by the end of 2025. So we're really looking at being more consistent. We're making sure that we are accounting for any damage that's been done over the past few decades when it comes to crossings, bridges, structures, making those design decisions in the correct way, and identifying where those key decision points are, making the changes that we need to make. Sharing data is also a key component of what we're working on here. And there are a couple of efforts that fall under our Complete Streets initiative that I'll speak to in a minute that we want to focus on for that. So next steps, just really that came out of this policy review or audit of all of the documents that needed to really get up to par and be in alignment with our vision. These are the next steps that are going to be taking up most of our time for the next 5 months or so. So we'll be starting the revisions to those other standards, manuals, policies, and guidance, looking at our decision-making processes, getting into the nitty-gritty and asking those hard questions, looking at how we can modify the way that we're measuring performance. So that's that example of using crash modification factors to understand how impactful our biking and walking network can be. Collaborating during implementation, so making sure that we're bringing stakeholders to the table earlier on, and we have some really specific ways in which we want to do that. I know that sounds like a very general statement, but we can actually bring that to fruition through some of the efforts that are ongoing right now. And then number 5, just providing that ongoing education and outreach and training. We are going to get more detailed trainings that are specific to these cohorts that we have here. So our elected officials, our district engineers, our consultant partners, our local jurisdictions, our advocacy communities. We have all of that coming down the pipeline. And as I mentioned, we have a couple efforts ongoing right now that fall under this Complete Streets umbrella. We're calling it a Model Complete Streets Initiative, which is just an effort to make sure that we are setting an example for other states when it comes to complete streets. I think we did that by pioneering, this Vision Zero law in 2019. That was a huge feat, but there's a lot that can follow that. And I think our Model Complete Streets initiative starts to unveil some of the related efforts there. So our Pedestrian Safety Action Plan that SHA worked on, that was released this year, as well as our Complete Streets. Actually, I believe the PSAP was released the year before. So that's kind of an accomplishment now that I can say, oh, last year the plan was released. Now we're actually in the action portion of it and implementing it. So I know that Carm from our District 3 office will be a part of a panel later and speaking a little bit to that. But then we also have our Complete Streets Leadership Academy and the CSLA Technical Assistance Program gives us an opportunity to work with Smart Growth America to implement quick builds on state roads. And so that gives us a chance to not only test out new countermeasures and new treatments, but also test out our new processes, our new coordination practices that we're trying to implement, making sure that we're bringing partners to the table earlier on. We're able to try to develop project and concept development with players that aren't usually at the table through this effort, and then see how that works, get some feedback, and see if we need to make that a part of our implementation plan for Complete Streets. We've got several other efforts that are always ongoing. And so what we're looking to do is make sure that we're all speaking from the same sheet of music, syncing them up, and trying new things, doing peer exchanges, learning from others, and really just advancing some of the things that are in our bike ped master plan, including the kickoff of our statewide trail plan update. So that's pretty much it. In a nutshell, I believe our website, mdot.maryland.gov/complete streets, houses most of the information in this PowerPoint, and it may also include the PowerPoint as well. We also have other resources available, and we'll be loading that website up as we hit more and more milestones and have more information to share. And certainly as we develop more trainings that can be offered to you all. So I will pipe down now, and thank you, Cheryl, for the opportunity.
Thanks so much, Kandese. I was going to ask for an example, but I think Carm is give us an example because she's covering State Highway Administration. But before we do that, I actually wanted to invite a couple of community people to speak about their work and what they're learning. And so first I wanted to invite Clarise Cook-Ward, who is a teacher at Central High School. And I had the privilege of meeting her when we did a walk audit. WABA helped us put together a walk safety audit with students and with the school community at Central High School, which obviously is very close to Central Avenue, and many students actually ride the bus and use Central Avenue all the time. And so we wanted to hear from Ms. Cook-Ward about your experience and your interactions with students and staff and how you have experienced challenges related to safe access to school.
Good afternoon, everyone. My primary concern my students have expressed is the speeding that takes place on Central Avenue. They say that when they're trying to cross the street at Cabinet Branch and Central Avenue, it's almost like trying to cross over the Beltway because people are speeding so much. And then the secondary concern that they have is the sidewalks or the lack thereof on the way from Cabin Branch to Central Avenue on the right-hand side. There are no sidewalks on the right going towards Central Avenue. And they walk into the street when it's raining, which of course is an unsafe condition. I miss a boy who's also on the line, so our principal, and she can give you more information, because unfortunately I don't do bus studio too often. I'm not down on that end, so I'm not too familiar. The only experience I had was that one walk that we did. But based on, again, what the students have said is the lack of sidewalks, and some walk is the residents have their shrubbery overgrowing, and they have to walk into the street because there's so many trees and greenery that is growing out into the street.
Mm. Well, maybe we can ask Principal Savoy if you wanted to say a few words about you know, what you see as concerns related to safe walking around the high school. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you, and thank you for the invitation. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Cherie Savoy, and I'm the principal of Central High School. I do want to start by thanking you for including us on this initiative. As we know, the first step to being able to educate our students is to have them safely. And so we do experience some challenges because if you travel Central Avenue and Cabin Branch, it's a major intersection there that there is a crosswalk, but it's a major intersection. I have to cross a 4-lane highway, 2 lanes and going in either direction. And so the bus stops actually sit down right there at those corners, and there's no light. And so that is sometimes a concern for students coming to school that are traveling down Central Avenue towards Capitol Heights in Washington, D.C., that they have to cross across the street in the morning. So that is a challenge for some of our students. Also, as Ms. Cook-Ward mentioned, and I'm not sure if this is the group or the forum, but the lack of sidewalks on the right side of Cabin Branch. So as students walk down the hill to exit the school property, we have sidewalks on both sides of the street. But to create a continuum so students don't have to cross the street and interfere with cars coming into the school, there's the lack of the sidewalk on the right-hand side. So having a sidewalk on that right-hand side would truly be beneficial and safe for the students, because we do have a large walking population. I would say probably 75 to 80% of our students actually walk to school. And not a lot of them come from the community, because we do sit in the community, but many of them come from outside of the housing development. And so a lot of them travel down Central Avenue. And so in the morning, they have to either cross at the light at Cindy Lane, or you have to cross at the light at Shady Glen. But if you're in those houses between Shady Glen and Cindy Lane, or if you're in those houses between Cindy Lane and Cabin Branch, you're more likely to travel all the way down and have to cross over at that major intersection right there at Cabin Branch. So having an initiative like this that will really look into the safety and making sure that our students get to us safely is truly beneficial. And so I do appreciate the opportunity to be here and to be able to be a part and a part of the solution to support with making sure that my students are able to get to school safely so they can get their education on a daily basis.
Great. Thank you, Principal. I wanted to invite
You're
Ashley
welcome.
to share with us the work that she's been doing with the capital market, which I guess is doing lots of great work all over the community. Ashley, can you tell us about the work that you've been doing?
Absolutely. Thanks, Cheryl, for having me. My name is Ashley Drakeford. I am the Chief Officer of Vibes of the Capital Market. I just want to really quickly echo, like, the students, I had an opportunity to join the Central High School walk audit, and the students there were amazing, really smart. I spoke with a number of them that were on their way to college. So it was an awesome experience. And it was great to have their feedback about their community, right? You know, and as I was talking to them, you know, some of the conversations were like, hey, these are your roads, right? These are the design that's coming are for the students that will, you know, hopefully one day take over the world. So it was just an awesome experience to be able to be with them. So thank you for allowing that. So my work at the Capital Market, we really connect food, farms, friends, and the future of our neighborhoods. At the Capital Market, we center what's considered the Blue Line Corridor, but really we focus on healthy food priority zones in Prince George's County. As a part of that, right, when you think about healthy food, and you think about sustainable land use development, when you think about accessing healthy food, or you think about building culturally relevant food systems, one thing that people always forget as a part of that is how people access that food, right? If I am if I am a parent that takes the bus, that rides their bike, that needs to go to the grocery store like all of us do, how do I access that? And can I access those, those community assets in a safe, enjoyable way? It was pretty cool to hear about the complete streets that the state of Maryland is doing. I think that what the Capital Market really kind of brings to that in our healthy food community walk audits, one thing that my sister always says is that stories are data too, right? So how does it feel? So one of the things that we do when we do healthy food community walk audits with neighbors in the Capitol Heights, Seat Pleasant, Suitland, District Heights area, we talk about how does it feel? What does it feel like when I'm on that road? Are cars flying by really fast? You know, what are the sounds that you're hearing? What are you smelling? Are people too close to you when you're trying to walk down the sidewalk? Is there enough room for, one or more people to ride the opposite way? I will say that some of our work doing the healthy food community walk audits and really training up citizens to be advocates has been really awesome. It's been very eye-opening. Just having people pay attention to things like, are there continuous sidewalks? And what does it feel like if you're having to carry groceries from one point to another and not being able to access that? Opening up people's minds to, we did a pop-up, we call it the Turn Up Tour at Addison Road Metro Station. And we met a number of community members that had mobility issues and maybe were in wheelchairs. And so we had long conversations about what their experience is like, maybe traveling from Addison Road Metro Station or the Capitol Heights Metro Station to their communities. And some find it pretty difficult and pretty challenging. So that really kind of centers, the Capital Market, like I said, we make sure to bring healthy foods to our community, and we advocate for culturally aware food systems as well as sustainable land use development. But as it kind of centers our work in terms of transportation, the healthy food community walk audits is really one of the biggest things that we're doing right now.
Great. Thank you so much, Ashley, for your work. I see
sure.
you doing stuff all over the place. Well, I wanted to invite Carm, and Carm, is it Saimbre?
Saimbre.
Saimbre?
Yes.
From Maryland State Highway Administration. And why don't you explain what District 3 is in case people don't know? And, I guess it's sort of like we're excited to, look at the work that Kandese is doing at the statewide level and to look how we can translate this into Prince George's County and even right down to Central Avenue. And so we're excited to hear about, what SHA District 3 is working on and what are the prospects for us getting some of these changes that Kandese is talking about?
Sure. So just to introduce myself to everyone, my name is Carm Saimbre. I'm the Community Relations Manager for Prince George's County at SHA's District 3 office. District 3 contains both Montgomery County and Prince George's County. So my role basically is to keep the public and the community apprised of everything that we're doing related to projects, programs, and operations coming out of District 3. As you can imagine, District 3 contains about a third of the state's population. We have the Capital Beltway, we have I-270, we have lots of major roads, lots of main roads, state highways that also serve as kind of main streets, if you will, for some of the municipalities and some of the unincorporated areas throughout Prince George's and Montgomery County. So no 2 days are the same in District 3. We're quite busy. But as Kandese kind of mentioned in her presentation, the Complete Streets policy that MDOT SHA recently implemented here on earlier this summer, it's very exciting. And the Pedestrian Safety Action Plan kind of serves as a supporting effort to implementing the Complete Streets policy. So I can kind of provide like a really high level overview. I'm also happy to provide any links if folks aren't super familiar with the Complete Streets policy or the Pedestrian Safety Action Plans and some of the other things that support it, including our context-driven guide, the context-driven toolkit, and the treatments that are part of those toolkits to kind of help inform the treatments that we can kind of do in a quicker fashion, if you will, when it comes to achieving some of the bike and pedestrian safety goals that we have here at State Highway Administration. So the Pedestrian Safety Action Plan, or PSAP, as you all are probably familiar, transportation is filled with lots of jargon and lots of acronyms. So I'll do my best to unpack those for us here tonight. It's a supporting effort of the Complete Streets policy at the Maryland Department of Transportation. At SHA, at the District 3 office, there are a handful of kind of PSAP projects that are kind of coming down the pipeline that are currently advancing through design. And the 2 that are part of cohort 1, if you will actually focus on Maryland 410, so kind of up in Hyattsville, and there's another project on Maryland 650. And that project is interesting in that it runs through both Montgomery County and Prince George's County. So to kind of give folks a bit of a flavor of what PSAP projects will look like in terms of the improvements that'll be involved with those projects, there are 13 kind of, they're called countermeasures or treatments, and those include upgrading continental crosswalks, installing things like the rapid reflecting flashing beacons or RRFBs. Those also include hardening center lines, so making it a little more challenging for drivers when they're making turns to have to slow down versus catching a turn really quickly and kind of whipping around the corner. So upgrades like that don't require, say, as much of a like drawn out project development process, but can kind of be done in a quicker fashion to kind of deliver on these safety improvements to make things feel better for our vulnerable road users, right? For the folks who are not traveling in their motor vehicles, for folks who are walking, for folks who are biking, and being really focused on making those connections, right? So to Principal Savoy's point, when it comes to those sidewalks, like that little bit of sidewalk, making that connection could radically change, our high schoolers' experience when they're walking to and from school. It's one less thing to be stressed about, right? When you're traveling on the state roads, you can kind of be focused on getting from point A to point B without being concerned about how will I navigate knowing that the sidewalk kind of ends there. So those are the kinds of things that the PSAP kind of aims to do. And I can drop more information in the chat. There's a boatload of information, and a lot of it is very it's written in layman's terms. I know a lot of folks can get kind of caught up in transportation speak and in jargon. So it's very accessible in terms of how we're talking about the treatments and the kind of visions that we have for making our state roads safe for everyone.
Thanks, Carm. So can you give some more examples? I mean, I guess you gave a number of examples of sidewalks, rapid flashing beacons, hardened center lines, and those you're saying are things that you can do more quickly. Is that the kind of thing you're seeing on, say, like Maryland 410 in Hyattsville? Oh, you're on. Yeah.
Apologies, I'm unmuted now. So yes, as part of those projects, the kind of improvements that will be part of that particular project are still kind of being fleshed out. But will include things like making the roadway, the corridor, moving the focus away from moving cars, right, and to kind of shift the focus on moving vehicles that move more people, like our buses, or vehicles that aren't necessarily motorized, like bikes, and obviously helping to move pedestrians. In terms of other countermeasures that do exist, I'm just pulling it up here because the list it's pretty exhaustive. So there's pedestrian hybrid beacons, reducing the speed limit as well, protected intersections, LPIs, or
What's a
excuse me.
protected intersection?
So a protected intersection is, it kind of forces everything to kind of slow down a bit, if you will. So with like adding things like kind of extending the median out a little bit. So if there's like a median, say, that's super narrow, making it a little bit wider so that you can kind of reduce lane widths as well. And what I'll do is I'll drop this here in the chat. Like I said, the
We'll also
website.
capture it and share it out in a follow-up
Yeah.
email too.
Yes,
But
absolutely. So let me do that here. Putting things like lane width reduction, forgive me, as I just mentioned, doing things like no turn on red, right? These are smaller things that don't necessarily require as much of as an involved process, and can kind of be delivered quicker than, say, some of our more traditional projects.
And then are there both kind of these, it's great to hear about like quick action to kind of do what you can to address, safety concerns quickly, but do you have sort of like a timeline in terms of like midterm and longer term kind of larger, scale revisions of the roadway?
I don't have a timeline that I could share specifically, at least not one that would be honest, so I don't want to give you bad information. But in terms of the projects that are coming up through cohort 1, those will kind of start to come online in terms of moving through design beginning in 2026. So that's the kind of the soonest that those first few projects in cohort 1 of the PSAP will kind of start to advance through design.
Okay, 2026. Okay.
And if I could, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
If I could add just one more thing, for some of the countermeasures that I kind of mentioned here, like I said, there are about 13 that are kind of highlighted and featured in the context-driven design, in the context-driven guide, the toolkit, and as well as the PSAP. We also have a website that kind of showcases all of the context-driven treatments that SHA has done since 2019. So when we first kind of launched the context-driven guide kind of 1.0, and you can see the different treatments throughout the county, so across all the districts in the state, and you can kind of drill down and see in District 3 as well, between Montgomery and Prince George's, the different treatments that we've done, whether it's been continental crosswalks, whether it's been the installation of the kind of green pavement marking for bike lanes, that's also considered like a treatment as part of this package here, as well as several others. So to avoid kind of going back and forth here in the chat, I can send all this information to you, Cheryl, and then you can kind of disseminate that more widely.
Great. And you mentioned the context guide. That's the idea that SHA is saying, well, this is kind of like a town center or like a very urban place. So it's going to have, street designs that are kind of slower speeds and bicycle friendly and better, bus access, things like that. One of the things looking at it, I don't know if there's, I can't quite tell how important this is, that there's actually no urban core land use designations under the context guide for Prince George's County, and there's a number in Montgomery County, and there's only one like urban, the next thing over urban center or something, and that's only the University of Maryland College Park. And so, Prince George's has 15 metro stations and 11 Purple Line stations coming through, and so I'm interested if the state is thinking about revisiting how it came up with these designations to make sure that Prince George's gets, more focus on these more urban, pedestrian friendly street designs.
So the Pedestrian Safety Action Plan, as well as the context-driven guide, they're working documents. So over time, there'll kind of be revisions, and we will revisit this as the communities that we are serving change, right? And I also see that Kandese has turned on her camera, so she may be able to add a little more context to that question as well.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt. You're right on target there. I've just maybe add that I think you're speaking to a couple of different points there, Cheryl. Yes, it's a fact that there are very few urban cores in the state of Maryland. And in the state of Maryland, period. And yes, especially in Prince George's, but it is a fact that in Maryland, I believe it's Baltimore City and College Park and maybe Bethesda. So there might be 3 total in the whole state, or maybe one more. So that's not typical of our land use in Maryland, right? Urban cores, that density, but we see in our master plans and a lot of our corridor vision studies that maybe there's a desire for increased density. And certainly that's the direction that Prince George's County is going. You can see that in the general plan and the updates to those documents as well. So, and we know at the state level, TOD is becoming more prevalent. We actually have an established office and are reinvigorating the efforts around that. And then certainly with Blue Line in Prince George's County, there's renewed energy around economic development and creating more density. So I think that's one sort of tract, right, in the economic development world. But then with transportation and responding to the land use changes that are coming up online, right, we don't necessarily control the pace of that, but we are able to plan for safer roads to accommodate that. And I think that's what Carm was speaking to, in that we can adjust as development patterns change, but we know that that's kind of like a long game, if you will. So, and that's the use for the pedestrian safety action plan in developing those corridor-wide, long-term, bigger capital projects that complement the smaller incremental improvements that we can do. So, for example, Maryland 650, while the rest of cohort 1 is working really quickly to get design completed by 2026, 650 should be at least starting or completing construction by 2026. So we are committing to constructing 1 corridor and really advancing design on 4. And then while those 5 are vacant, we're going to get started on another 5. So we can make our way down that list of 23. And 214 is in there. We ranked all of the state roads. So it's not to say that we have to work on them in that sort of order. They can all get attention and love at the same time. You're helping with that, Cheryl. Prince George's County can help us with that, the RAISE grant, everything, it's all complementary. But with respect to urban cores and creating more density, that's a longer game. We can respond to it and change the context as that comes about, but that too will take time.
A little bit of a chicken and egg, though, don't you think?
Absolutely. It is. And there are whole discourses around that, Cheryl. We could go on for days.
I want to invite other people to pose questions, or if there's other reflections from some of the people that we've heard from. Actually, Dan, do you want to ask your question? You put something in the chat. Can you you had a question to Carm and Kandese?
Yeah, sure. I put it in the chat, but I was just curious. The new policy says complete streets will apply when permitting new or constructed streets to access MDOT right away. And I think a few folks had already given examples where developments along MDOT right away had created unsafe conditions. And I was wondering if the policy will apply to those sorts of access permitting and review.
Yeah, great question. I'll just start. I know that the access permitting is definitely more appropriately addressed at the local level.
You mean like cutting in a new driveway or something, or like a drive-through? Is that what you mean?
I think so. So the policy mentions adding or reconstructing streets that connect to the MDOT right away, but some of the examples were developments that were given access to MDOT right away and may have a negative impact on pedestrian safety and other things like that. So I was curious if it also applies to those sorts of reviews.
Yes. So at the district level, they kind of use something called an access manual that helps our local planning agencies and our development community apply for access to our roads. So if they need a driveway or they want to consolidate access points, or they need a new access point, they will have to get it permitted through our district office. And our district office uses a set of standards and guidance that was a part of our policy review and audit. And we made some recommendations for them to update it to make sure that we are working with the local planning agencies to require developers to build safer facilities for people who bike, walk, or use motorized e-scooters or wheelchairs. So that's one opportunity for us to impact the way that development looks along our roadways. But it'll take a couple of months for us to work on updating all of those documents, and more importantly, to coordinate with the locals who really do have the say-so in terms of the development review process. We defer to the locals in most cases, but we do have a bit of agency at the state, and we're looking to make sure that we're making those requirements where we need to.
Right. Does somebody else want to pose their question? Well, I'll ask another question. Is there planning that is going to update the planning for Purple Line stations as a part of this, since the idea is that the Complete Streets guidance would, go into kind of as you plan new projects as well?
Yeah, I mean, there's a requirement that projects that have not met the 30% milestone, so really have received an environmental document or their NEPA, that's pretty significant milestone for planning and a little bit of design. Any project that hasn't really met that mark in 2025 will be subject to our Complete Streets policy. If it's already received an environmental document and it's kind of done quite a bit in the project development process, those projects will be grandfathered in, if you will. But future reviews will always be with that lens of this new Complete Streets policy. So we're not going to require folks to start from the beginning if they've already invested a significant amount of time and money in their project. But a new project, for example, a brand new transit project or mega project that would come online in 2025 or later, we would be looking for them to be following the policy. We'd require it.
And for Kandese or Carm, I just wanted to follow up on a question. This is Bernard Holloway. I wanted to follow up kind of on the question I posed in the chat. I know you all mentioned that both New Hampshire Avenue along the Montgomery-Prince George's border and East West Highway in Hyattsville are currently slated for phase 1 of Pedestrian Safety Action Plan implementation. Could you all offer a little bit more sunshine on what else is in the programming queue, and where specifically the point of this conversation, where Maryland 214 and Central Avenue might be in terms of potential being up next in terms of future phases of the PSAP or inclusion in one of these quick build pilot project initiatives? And if not, kind of what are some of the things that people on this call could do to help expedite those changes and improvements to be made?
Kandese, do you want to take this one or should I?
No, I know nothing.
No, that's totally fine. So regarding the other projects that are part of cohort 1, like we mentioned, Maryland 650, Maryland 410, Maryland 150, which is in Essex and Baltimore County, Maryland 2, which is Ritchie Highway in Glen Burnie in Anne Arundel County, and lastly, US 1, which is Washington Boulevard in Laurel in Howard County. So those are the kind of the first 5 PSAP projects, and those we announced those at our ribbon cutting for the completion of the US 1 Rhode Island Avenue Trolley Trail project in December of 2024 here in Hyattsville. So that's kind of the first cohort. And as Kandese kind of mentioned, all of these projects are in design. Maryland 650 is a bit further along, if you will. So to her point that she said, in 2026, that project may either be just coming online in terms of construction or, pretty well along on its way, whereas the other 4 projects that are part of that cohort will kind of be advancing through design. Regarding where Maryland 214 or where Central Avenue kind of sits in terms of priority, I don't have much information that I can offer in terms of how soon it will rise up in terms of the next cohort. But once again, like Kandese said really, really, really well, is that the beautiful thing about these projects is that we can kind of give them all a kind of attention and love at the same time. They may not be in the same phase, but we're all we're able to give each of the different projects that are within the cohort attention and kind of move them along in batches. But in regards to where 214 sits in that priority, I can't provide like a timeline as to when that would come online. But I would hope to be able to provide more information in the future, but just not at this time.
Carm, is it that you've been, obviously, you've taken up promoting, MDOT is promoting quick build pilots, and you cited basically things that can be done quickly, basically. And so is it that we might see some improvements there that are kind of the easier things to do, the less expensive and easier things to implement? And then over time, we could see some of the more significant kinds of countermeasures?
Yeah, that's a possibility, but I just can't commit to saying that it would for certain happen like within this fiscal year. Like, and I don't want to set that kind of expectation to have like the agency not be able to meet that. So it's a possibility, but I couldn't commit to a timeline.
Do folks who are in the chat want to raise some of the issues that they're talking about in the chat? Melissa or Dan?
Yeah, sure. So this is Melissa. I guess, again, I really appreciate the pedestrian safety action plan, and I'm very excited about the changes, but it's a little disappointing that they're such short corridors. So it's, maybe a mile and a half or something in Hyattsville. And again, like, is it a funding issue? Is it a wanting to pilot and be cautious issue? Like, why are there just these 5 and then there's a whole list of other corridors, and what's the plan for kind of quick piloting, quick learning to really again scale that? And the other question about expediting, the need is so great, not in terms of just the number of roads, but the length of these roads, and not just doing a mile and a half on a road, but treating the whole corridor. And how do we expedite that, and why is what is the plan for scaling after they have these pilots?
Sure. So I really appreciate the question and the concern there. I can appreciate how it may seem or may feel frustrating that it may feel like we're only looking at a certain segment of a corridor and kind of ignoring the rest, but that's not what's kind of happening there. Long before the kind of PSAP came online, in terms of the data gathering that we had to do, there was data that kind of informed why specific segments of the corridors would kind of elevate or kind of rise to the top in terms of like the list of all the different corridors that we had looked at statewide, right? So in terms of the kind of the segments that we're looking at, that we are looking at per corridor that's in this first cohort, it's very intentional in that like that particular segment just needed the most attention based on either number of crashes or other data that is all publicly available on the website for the context-driven guide, the toolkit, and kind of how the data gathering fed the PSAP. So I understand and can very much appreciate the frustration there. But it wasn't done kind of haphazardly, like just kind of nitpicking segments out of each of these corridors. And in regards to expediting implementation, to kind of assuage some fears, all of the projects that are in cohort 1 are fully funded. So we should not encounter the issue of a project kind of getting to design and stalling out. Like, they're fully funded through construction. So once we kind of get the ball rolling, because cohort 1 is essentially the pilot cohort, these will serve as the examples for us to kind of learn from as an agency and to be able to apply lessons learned to the other cohorts. So I hope that that kind of illuminates a little bit more about the implementation and the speediness of it. So yeah, just in regards to how we're kind of approaching it, cohort 1 is kind of serving as the pilot, and we're using this cohort to be able to kind of apply the lessons learned to other cohorts as the remaining projects kind of come online.
And Carm, is there a website you can share that gives sort of the details of these projects, these cohort 1 projects, so we can see the
absolutely.
collection of interventions that you're providing?
Yeah, it's all on, it's like the PSAP, the context-driven initiative, the toolkit, and there's different tabs and then like tabs within the tabs. So it's a lot of information. So you can definitely be digging for a good while there, but all the information that I'm kind of overviewing and trying to run through in a very condensed way here, it's all available online.
Great.
We do have on our mdot.maryland.gov/complete streets, the graphic or the board that we used to launch our PSAP implementation back in December. And that board had just briefly what all the 5 corridors are, and maybe a little bit of information. So that might be a good starting point. but we're definitely working on building out additional information as the projects get more and more baked, if you will. But the question about funding these 5 corridors, we float $100 million over the next 6 years to accomplish design of 4 and construction of 1. So there are 23 high priority corridors, and there are these short segments. So multiply that 100 million times 5. I mean, that's not an accurate depiction at all. But if we were to do a cost estimate, it would be a very expensive plan to build out all at once. But not just costs alone, it requires resources, people, contracts, things that it's just difficult to do all at once. And so that's why the prioritization effort was really, really a key component of developing the plan. It was important to figure out where we would get the most impact, and we looked at crashes for that as the main indicator. There are several different indicators that Carm spoke about, and our website talks a little bit about, but we can obviously give more information or education on that. But I would say safety was the key component there. So we looked for the highest crash numbers, and the most need, where the gaps were, and where the level of traffic stress was very high for people who are biking and walking. So I do think we did a good job of biting off something manageable, but also identifying what the larger scope of our needs are. And that's that 115 corridors that we ranked that we just can't do all at once.
And can you actually talk a little bit about what you hope to gain out of the training and education programs that you've launched?
Yeah, sure. Well, we're hoping to launch that in the next few weeks. What we've done so far is just meet internally with our MDOT modes to help them understand what the policy means, and then what their charge is for the next 5 months so that we can start implementing it in 2025. In the meantime, we know that we've got to tell other folks what this policy means, what it means to them, to their everyday lives, or to their jobs. And so the trainings will be centered around that as well. Specifically, I have an interest in K through 12 children going to and from school safely. And our Model Complete Streets initiative gives us an avenue to work on that as well. So we are working on operationalizing Safe Routes to School beyond just a grant program, but making it sort of a more comprehensive effort. And so I really appreciate having Cherie, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong, and Ashley, and just folks who participated in the walk audit in the past and can tell us about some other types of data points to collect to make the input and the changes more meaningful to the community. So that kind of outreach, or just sort of building a rapport with that community, to me translates to, oh, they're going to need some sort of training too, right? And so sometimes that training is, how can we incorporate what you're doing into our processes, or how can we educate you about what we're doing so you can tell us, how we can collaborate better. So it's looking more like a two-way street, as opposed to just, us providing a report of what we're doing. That's kind of the goal there. So I would say the first thing that we have baking is a training supported by our National Highway Institute, NHI, and the Federal Highway Administration, where we can collaborate with them to develop an MDOT specific complete streets training that can be attended by members of the public, members of the MDOT modes, members of WMATA, members of the community, a broad range of folks. You can have sort of an initial training and then follow that up with similar things that are meaningful to the community. So we have, a lot to do.
I mean, because, when we look at, roadways that even, the posted signage around on Central Avenue, around Addison Road, actually to Capitol Heights, to the Capitol Heights Metro Station. I mean, it's signed for 30 miles an hour. But we know that the typical travel speeds on those roads it far exceeds that. And, you know, it is a 6-lane highway. And so there's a complete mismatch between the design of the road and what, you know, the state has gone out and said should be the appropriate speed for the road. But you don't get that from the design. It seems like it's an opportunity, maybe through your updated complete streets policy, to be engaging with a lot of the decisions, the engineers who are making these decisions along the way that have gotten us to this place where we have a massive 6-lane roadway that's supposed to, you know, have drivers go 30 miles an hour.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be able to, now that we're positioned at the Secretary's office, and some of you may know that I worked at State Highway for a few years. Now I get to get out of that bubble and work with all of the modes, but not just the modes, all of the offices. I worked in the planning office at SHA. So this really gives us the opportunity to like spread that message even farther. And we're having those hard conversations. So my next touch point in a couple weeks is with all of the decision makers in our Office of Traffic and Safety. They approve the design requests or deny them at times, you know, and they really make some critical decisions for us. So I'll get to tell them exactly what it is that we want to do with this policy, and they'll get to ask me some really hard questions, and we can figure this out together. So I've been really looking forward to talking to this group, and they're statewide. So you know, having these conversations that we've never really had before and engaging the Secretary's office is just, you know, new territory, but really exciting. So I think there's a lot of promise there. And even the fact that you're inviting us to these meetings and we're attending and listening, attending the walk audits. We have people from TSO walking, you know, the audits. And I just think that it says a lot, and we're looking forward to just like following up on that with actual action.
Cheryl, can I just wanted to, as you all were talking, I was really thinking about, you know, some of the studies that you all mentioned, some of the things that are upcoming. And I wondered if there's an opportunity. I mean, in my mind, I'm thinking about a time lapse, right? I travel Central Avenue almost every single day, especially I go to church right off of Addison Road and Central Avenue. A lot of the work that I do in the communities that I work with. And I've lived in this area for a long time. But I've seen so many different, I guess, strategies put in place to slow people down, right? To help out with pedestrian safety. I know the barriers are up on Central Avenue. I know that, you know, when you're going into the metro station, there's a crosswalk with the lights that are there that are meant to slow people down, right? And I've seen the roads kind of reformatted in different ways. But still, I mean, it's not a week that goes by that I still don't see something crazy happen right there. And it's so dangerous for pedestrians. And so, I mean, I'm just thinking like the other day, I don't know how familiar everyone in the group is with the crosswalk that goes, that they put up to get to the metro station. Do you know where I'm talking about, Cheryl? What's the name of that street? Right. And so essentially where that crosswalk is, if you're going away from DC, you're not able to you can't make a U-turn at that light. You can only make a right turn into the metro station, right? But I saw a car that was coming from Washington, that area, Washington, DC, turn up in there in the lane that's meant for people to only make a left turn, just to make a U-turn to go into like the liquor station or whatever the case is. And so, you know, I guess, I'm not sure if it's really a question or a comment, but, you know, I wonder, because I have seen lots of strategies implemented to try to slow people down, to try to make it more safe for pedestrians. But I mean, there still seems to be some gaps. So I wonder, like, you know, what do these designs actually have to look like in order to, I guess, really make it safe for people, or to, you know, slow people down or whatever the case is? Or is there an opportunity for some sort of, I know I heard, the mention of different studies. Is there an opportunity to have like an ongoing study just to kind of actually see the types of things that are happening there?
I think that's such a great point, because we can't just ignore the fact that we do try to make interventions and they sometimes don't work. We can't just turn a blind eye to that, and getting that anecdotal data from someone who lives there and sees this and asks the hard questions. What do these designs need to look like for them to work? That's important. And sometimes they need to look a little more tactical than we might have in our standards. And I think that's why it's important to have, a human being viewing and doing the audit. I think that at District 3, they've really set their community relations manager team up nicely, led by Carm. And these are the folks that I'm introducing to my team at TSO as the ones that are boots on the ground and really the liaisons with the community. So my role right now allows me to activate them as much as possible beyond what they're already doing. I already reached out to Carm and got a listing of who everyone is at the districts, and luckily at District 3 they have several. So I think that bodes well for you all, and I believe the team is kind of newish or growing. So perhaps that's going to bring new energy. But I'm open to keeping this line of communication, having these conversations and trying new things. Sometimes our district offices are really helping to deliver the day-to-day, but I think from where I sit, I can help with some of those more long range, creative, strategic planning types of things. So let's keep that communication going. I love ideas like this. I kind of call my team we're kind of like an incubator for these types of things. And we're supported by an administration that lets us try new things like our quick build pilots. So, for 214, I could see us we've done 3 districts with this round for our CSLA, and that's basically allowed us to do concept development, design, construction, data collection and removal or maintenance in a span of just a few months. And get, people like you actually at the table helping us make those design decisions, collecting the data, getting the word out, and then being part of the removal or the maintenance. So if we did that in District 3 and we picked a corridor that we felt like could really use it, for example, 214, that could be a way to try something new, not committing per se to a permanent intervention, but that's starting the conversation, starting the process, making the case for future funding, activating funding that already exists, So I'll shut up now, but yes, good question.
Yeah, and to Bernard sort of chimed in on reinforcing Ashley's point that this 214 is a very wide roadway with really high speeds that are a complete mismatch for what the posted speed limit is. It really does look like it's a good candidate for a road diet, which means taking away 2 travel lanes. So rather than 6 travel lanes, it would be 4 travel lanes. And we could help to get drivers to have, kind of saner, lower speed movement as they go through the community.
And if I could just add on really quickly, my apologies, Cheryl, there's also a bit of a lag, so forgive me if I end up cutting you off. Just to add on to what Kandese said there, another really critical component of this is something we already have in our toolkit, and that's education, right? That's having forums like this where, it might just be 25, 30 of us that are here having this conversation. But in the same way that I'm the community relations manager and I do my best to kind of amplify the message of the new Complete Streets policies, the PSAP projects, being able to share this information with advocacy groups like CSG, like WABA, and to kind of share this information with the audiences that you are in touch with, to spread the word so we can kind of get that feedback in real time about what's working, what's not working, what we like, what we don't like, to kind of break out of the silos, if you will, that sometimes tend to exist when it comes to when it comes to wanting to make these kinds of improvements and trying to avoid getting like mired and caught up in like red tape or just like bureaucracy, if you will, like this is really exciting. It may not come off that way, but it's really exciting that we have these now, we now have these new tools in our toolkit because it gives us a new way to think about these things and kind of gives us permission to think outside the box, and permission to educate people outside the box as well about some of these new and exciting things that we're doing. So we at SHA, and I know at MDOT as a whole, are really, really excited about this stuff, and are grateful to have these forums, these platforms where we can have these webinars, have these kind of virtual forums, we can have these conversations and take this feedback back and continue to kind of refine and tweak and implement as we move forward. So I just wanted to put that out there, that education is definitely a tool that we have always had and will continue to use very robustly.
Well, I wanted to call on Steve Hardig for what he said, and Jamie Fearer. Steve, and then Stephen, do you want to just express your skepticism, basically? We
Sure.
appreciate SHA and MDOT being here, but
Yeah, I'm excited about the new complete streets policy statewide. Happy that the policy is moving in the right direction. But we've seen complete street policies before. There's the 2012 version, and we've seen Vision Zero policies. At the county level and state level, and the same kinds of roads keep being built. Maybe there's a painted bike lane. Maybe they add a pedestrian fence to keep people from crossing the road where they want to, but it's still the same road. It's still a 4 or 6 lane highway. Why should we think that this policy is going to actually make SHA start building roads differently when, it didn't really work the last time?
No, that's a great question. We made sure that we included it in this presentation, and we do have more detailed presentations that dive a bit deeper. But there are some differences between the 2012 and 2024 policy, specifically with respect to how we make sure that SHA is going to make the roads look different. So one of the things that we've done is adopted our toolkit, which includes things that have never been done on state roads. So the more those get implemented, the more our roads will start to look different. Our pedestrian safety action plan, that was the first time that's ever been done in the state, and it was focusing on the most vulnerable user and safety. So again, something that SHA or MDOT has never done before, and hopefully as that gets built out, our roads will start to look differently. With our complete streets policy, we've made it so that we're requiring the state to adopt something called crash modification factors. And in the industry, you may know already, it's not something that's commonly done because it's very hard to do. It's hard to predict how many lives a sidewalk will save. But there are ways that you can go about it and start to put numbers to the reasons why you're investing money in a particular type of treatment. So say a protected intersection, which came up before, that wasn't something that you really saw on state roads. I don't believe you'll see any outside of like Silver Spring or maybe in Baltimore City, but it's not really something that we're doing pretty often. Now that we've adopted it into our toolkit, which is a whole process, we have the data that supports why we should be using it. And then after we'll start implementing it, we can create case studies to inform future improvements. So there are literally treatments that are on state roads or will be on state roads that we've never seen before. And then in the future, we'll be able to prove that more innovative treatments will actually reduce lives and require that those sort of ratings be attached to our designs. So I do think our roads will start to look different. I think 650 should be a good example of how we'll start to do that. We definitely had sort of pie in the sky dreams when we thought about redesigning all 23 corridors. But then we realized that even with budget constraints, safety was still going to be our top priority, and there was still work that we could do. So I think our 650 corridor will look different. It might not look like Amsterdam, but it's going to be something that you've never seen in Maryland before.
And Jamie, I want to wrap things up. Jamie, can you maybe state your question, which gets into a little bit of technical detail?
Sure. Hey, good evening, everybody. And I know it is a technical question, but I thought this was the right audience and it actually came up at work today. But in the new manual on uniform traffic control devices, which for instance, prescribes how we are able to mark and sign our roadways when we make these improvements, there are some significant changes, both from a safety perspective and from an accessibility perspective, in the new federal guidance. And I think states have 2 or so years to adopt that federal guidance. And I know that Maryland not only adopts the federal guidance, but adapts it and produces a Maryland MUTCD. And I was just wondering if there's any update on the timeline that we could expect the Maryland version of the 11th edition to know when we can, and I'm speaking as a local municipal planner who implements projects on our local roadways, but also works with SHA on our state highways in the city of Greenbelt, when we can expect that guidance to be available in the state.
I'm not sure that they have committed to a date or shared that out yet, but I do know that I've been involved in the review probably every 2 to 4 weeks of a different section for the past few months. And I believe we've made it all the way through. So I know that they're going through their process. And I believe they take comments from us and start to adapt it, as you mentioned. So that is actively happening now. And I'm excited about that because it helps my case when I'm, advocating for complete streets, because luckily we had some changes to the MUTCD that finally, are catching up with the times. And that's something that our engineers subscribe to pretty heavily. It's the law. So that's going to help our case. So they're actively adapting it, and at the same time working on our implementation plan. Our implementation plan will probably come first, but I'm not certain on that 100%. It just feels like that's a heavy lift, and we've been working on MUTCD for quite some time. So those conversations are happening, simultaneously, and I think that it's really a good thing to help the process be as fruitful as possible. It's a lot of changes happening at once.
Thank you, Kandese. I want to wrap things up, and I actually just wanted to point out that WABA has a new initiative called Complete State Streets Initiative, and so we'll invite people to take a look at that, to get more engaged in that, really kind of building off of the initiatives that MDOT and SHA have put forward. But with that, I just really wanted to thank our friends from the state, Kandese Holford and Carm, and also our elected official, Krystal Oriadha from District 7, who joined us earlier, and the other elected officials with us. We want to continue to engage with the state. We are very excited about the direction that the state is going in. Policy-wise, there is so much work to do. We want to get it done as quickly as possible to build the kind of safe routes to school that all our kids should be able to enjoy going to Central High School or any school in the county, and really be able to walk safely to a food store or a bus stop. So with that, I'm going to thank everybody for joining us, and we will follow up with some links and we'll post the recording for this. It takes a day or two to pull it together. So with that, I want to thank everybody for joining us. So enjoy the rest of your evening. Good night.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
Cheryl.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it. You're great.
And thanks, Clarice. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Have a good evening.
You too. Bye-bye.